Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Global Lecture Series on Chinese economy. This year's lecture series consists of 12 talks from June 20th to July 26th, Beijing time. We have managed to invite influential scholars and professionals from different countries to join us in this series. We have also specifically initiated three mini-series on agriculture and environment, aging, long-term care and health, and technology platforms and the digital economy, respectively co-hosted by the China Academic for Rural Development at Zhejiang University, School of Labor and Human Resources at Renmin University of China, and School of Economics at Hefei University of Technology. Welcome to follow closely our events. Now, let me introduce our first speaker. I'm fortunate to serve as the chair of the first session. Our keynote speaker is Professor Dr. Klaus F. Zimmermann, who is the president of Global Labor Organization, also called GLO, a co-director of POP at United Nations University, MERIT, and Emeritus full professor of economics at Bonn University, Honorary Professor at a number of universities, including Lixin University and Renmin University of China. And he is also a member of German Academy of Sciences, Regional Science Academy, and Academia Europaea, editor-in-chief of the Journal of Population Economics. He further is a research fellow of CEPR, fellow at EEA, fellow of IEA, founding director of IZA, past president of DIW Berlin. And spring 2019, he has been the George Soros Visiting Professor at the School of Public Policy, Central European University, Budapest. Among others, he has worked before at University of Melbourne, Princeton, Harvard, Bonn, Munich, Kyoto, Monash, Dartmouth College, and University of Pennsylvania. He has published widely on top academic journals, and he is committed to diffusion of research to policy and society, writes regularly in leading international media, and advises the governments and institutions. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Klaus Zimmermann.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Xi, for this very nice summary. And I'm also feel honored to be able to be here today and to talk to you and present work I'm doing with colleagues, in this case with Shu Kai, on China. Now, I think I have to share a screen and hope things are going fine. Here you see
yes,
the outline.
it looks
of
perfect.
the talk. You can see it?
Yes.
The question is, does it move?
It doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
now I understand how it works. Okay, this time. Okay, sorry. This was the first slide. Yes, I was waiting for it. There you see the building of United University in Maastricht, where the center is. I'm working regularly. Now, this talk today is about social identity and labor market outcomes of internal migrant workers in China. Now, I would like to talk about these 4 points with very asymmetric weights. A few words about the journal I'm running, the Journal of Population Economics at the beginning. Then I will speak a bit about identity economics in general to bring in the general context of the presentation of today and my previous work in that area. And then we will investigate what we can learn from a study of social identity and what it means for labor outcomes in China. And finally, we have some conclusions. Now, the idea is we are more than just, even as economists, yes, we are more than just people working. As a worker, also we have an identity, and this identity can be in many ways. And well, the question is, to what extent has this identity something to do with economic performance? And also, well, what defines this identity? How can we measure it? And maybe how can we study it also separately? Now, first, a few words about the Journal of Population Economics I'm editing since 36 years, so it's a long period. It's a journal, an academic journal, which does international research on the economics of population, household, and human resources in many aspects. We are very global. It's on economic demography, family issues, household, migration, labor, development, health, risky behavior, fertility, mortality, marriage, divorce. So a lot of fields. Now we have about 700 or so more submissions per year, and an acceptance rate last year of only 6.3%. This year we will publish 4 issues, 3 are already out, with 16, 16, 26, and the final issue will have even 27 articles. So it's a large amount of material we are currently be able to produce and get out. However, what is important to understand, from next year on, we have continuous article publishing. This means whenever an article is accepted, that's an issue of speed, it directly gets published and is, so to speak, available online directly. It's not waiting for the next issue, maybe a year later or so. What is important to say is that we publish very many articles on China, and this is also reflected in the distribution of submissions you see on the left-hand side of the picture. So let's say Asia is rising over the years in relevance, also recently, and yeah, Europe is declining, but more or less we have now the same size, and most of Asia has to do with China, I have to admit. So we draw a lot of interest from Chinese researchers within or outside mainland China. Now, we are happy to report that just recently, we not only have increased substantially in the climate impact factor, which you see on the left-hand side. The number just will come out the next days. We're all waiting for this as editors, also as authors. However, the side scores by Elsevier are already out, and you see that the Journal of Population Economics now ranks 9.2, which is very, very high, and well, followed closely by China Economic Review, but in front of Econometrica and many other related journals to us. Only the Quarterly Journal of Economics is far away, and hopefully we can keep this performance over the next years, and maybe some of you who work on the field are interested to publish with us and use our material as input in your research. Now, let me speak a bit about identity economics in general. Well, identity economics nowadays is best maybe described with this little booklet by Eckloff and Quanten. They published already in 2010, Identity Economics. I think this is one of the most important innovations in recent decades in economics. And also, as the authors admit, we know that there is little distance between assumption and result of this approach. So you put in and you get it out. Yes, you put something in. So what you find is, or what you get is what you put in a way. There's a slight ironic criticism on the approach itself, but it's the idea why it's so important, I think, is as a value, is that it enables us to significantly view on reality differently. Yes, and it's a way we now can look at things in reality, which is important. So the point to cite the two authors, in every social context, people have a notion of who they are, which is associated with beliefs about how they and others are supposed to behave. These notions play important roles in how economies work. Now, when I was started working in that field, actually, I hadn't known yet the work of Klaus F, but as it is most in economics, well, things are going in various different ways around the globe, and sometimes ideas are on the table. Well, I was interested in something specific, not on identity in general, but on ethnic identity and its impact on economic behavior. And these are some of the works which have been done at that time. Now, the idea there was to create what we called an ethnocizer, a measurable statistical concept to determine the degree of identity people have in terms of ethnic issues. And basically, the idea was something like, when you look at the right below side here, of this diagram, if you move from 1,0 to 01, so to speak, on this line, that would be a linear path from one identity, commitment to the origin, to commitment to the region of destination. That would be an assimilation process to complete assimilation at the left-hand side. That's what's obviously is the ambition of many immigration policies in an international context, but is far away from reality often, which is the point. Now, well, however, yes, there is not only assimilation, that's A here in the first part of the picture, and separation, S at the lower part, where well, assimilation means, yes, you have the migrant or the person moving has, so to speak, taken over the local new identity, or separation means you are still in the old setting. Well, there can be something in between, and well, the literature has called integration when you have both. Yes, you like to eat Chinese cuisine, but also you still listen to, let's say, German music. Then that would be some kind of mixed forms of integration. That's also something what is provides capital in the international context, in particular, where knowledge of other countries is very important, and knowledge of other cultures in terms of collaboration. But there can be also marginalization, where there is no longer any context. People are lost. Neither the culture of origin nor the culture of destination plays a role, a relevant role, and that would be the fourth category. Basically, this makes these four parts in this picture. Now you can basically, this has been done in international studies, now allocate people to these four regimes and see what this implies for the performance also in the labor market and in social life, but also can be explained in terms of determinant variables. Yes. Now, what we have done in the ethnocizer was to say we take a set of 5 variables, language, culture, then ethnic self-identification, the people themselves say where they are, and ethnic interaction, migration history, ethnic interaction would be, well, how many contacts you have with locals or with people from your own ethnicity. And migration history would mean something about what have you done in the past, have you been traveling, where you're traveling, how long are you in the country, and so on. Now, the basic idea behind is to get not only the ethnic self-identification question, which is often used, because that could be, of course, well, not express complete the reality, but also the other packages of variables can suggest reality, so to speak, or actual behavior, where you show where you really are. And basically, it was the other argument at that time. You have not only one observation for a person, you have, well, 5 observations for a person based on lots of different variables used to create these variables. And that is certainly of value when you have the data, which is not always possible. And you will see that's also in the German case. This is just a table. I don't go deep in it, where you see how we have then further used material in a German data set, where so ethnic interaction, for instance, is the ancestry of the 3 closest friends and relatives, and culture is measured by preferred media and so on, and language about how good one is in German or in another foreign language. So just to give you an idea how it works, and then we can calculate, and I don't go into details here, they can calculate for each package the exact point the person is in, so the person is not completely allocated to one, at least not necessarily to one outcome, but the person can be in all 4 fields in a certain way. Then it would be very unclear information, but it can also the person can cluster in one field, and it would be very precise information. Okay, now what we find in these studies, for instance, is that pre-migration variables, post-migration variables, and ethnic identity have quite different effects, at least in the German context at that time. It's its first study. And one of those is, for instance, very interesting, having some schooling from the home country is worse for identity formation than no schooling for integration and assimilation. And in particular, country of origin information is more important for identity formation than experiences people have in the country of destination. So that is very important, that identity is not necessarily changing very much, is very much predetermined. That at least was the idea or the result at that time. Now, let me come to China and to social identity and labor outcomes in China. So here we will look now just on, or mainly on labor outcomes, and not how we measure social identity. We talk a bit about it in a moment, however. So now the presentation is here based on joint work with Professor Shu Kai of Jinan University, who is here, and we'll take all the difficult questions. Well, China, of course, has a huge internal migration, and you're much more aware of this. Also, I studied over the years with many people different aspects of that academically fascinating process. But China also has a relatively flat ethnic diversity. Yes, if you compare that with most African countries, just to give you a quick picture. And the quick picture says here, the greener the color is, the more diverse ethnically the region is, and the more brown it is, the more ethnically homogeneous it is. So there is a global diversity, which is studied by many colleagues in many ways. to find out the importance and the challenges and the potentials of diversity. I personally think that diversity is a potential and not necessarily a problem, as often it's said. Now, our motivation is that the social assimilation to host society is important. Second, that the social assimilation literature has focused on international mobility, neglecting more or less completely the internal labor mobility, because maybe assuming there is nothing going on anyway, so to speak, in a country. Also, diversity is typically also there determined by these kinds of differences. And China is a good country to look at because it has a lot of internal migration. And well, how does it work in China? These are our driving issues. Now, the main findings are summarized here. Social assimilation significantly increases the hourly wage and reduces the average hours worked per day and the likelihood of overworking. And well, while keeping the monthly wage unaffected, that might be a little bit, for me at least, a bit surprising. So basically, a little bit migrants become, internal migrants in China become a little bit more than natives. They have to work hard, of course, that's what we know. But they work less at the end after, of course, through this process, because they are able to earn more money in this process. And so there's this relationship between social identity and economic identity, which often was the core in the debate in economics. If we look at the big or Chiswick debates about assimilation in an economic term, it's about, well, how fast are migrants getting the wages of the natives, so to speak, the locals. Now, we also find out, and that's important as a check for the mechanism, that we understand why it happens, what we find. The improved labor market outcomes is mainly because of social assimilation. Assimilated migrants are more likely to interact with local people and are more likely to find jobs with the help from a local network. So it pays to mingle with locals. That's kind of the issue. Now, and I know this as a journal editor, but also as an author, when you submit a paper nowadays to a journal, a decent journal, there is immediately the issue on how do you identify your results, your causal effects. What is the identification strategy? Now, it's of course clear, and the literature has shown that language, knowledge of language in general, can positively affect labor market performance. So the question is, in what context is that in our study? We argue that we realize that in China, language is, like everywhere, is important, very important, central, and that people can speak the relevant language and write and read. But there are also dialects. That's also true in many other countries, and there's the same issues like here can happen. Now we argue that there's a unified writing system of Chinese across the country, and I mean, I talk to people who know all this much better than I know it. Dialects, there are more than 200 dialects, so far I understood. But the spoken language dialects vary substantially across the regions. So it's like speaking a kind of foreign language. Now, Mandarin Chinese, known as common speech, is the official language. So to speak, the standard dialect. And according to a survey in overall China, 70% speak of the population speaks Mandarin Chinese, and next to the local language knowledge. And also in schools, the government's operation is in Mandarin. So the assumption, the working assumption for this paper is that at the workplace you can get through with Mandarin. Yes, so if you have Mandarin, that's doable. Now this enables us to have the following identification strategy, which you see here. Well, labor income is our or labor outcome. It could be wages or work experience. Is affected by well, the social identity we want to measure. And vector X, but we have to explain what it is, and not dialect distance. Yes, because we claim that dialect distance is a usable instrument to explain social identity, and that would be the second equation. That would be the identifying regression, and the social exclusion restriction would be this red thing here. So that is a crucial point, and we have to convince ourselves and the readers and of course the referees of journals that this is a doable strategy. Well, of course, one can have a larger number of robustness checks, and we have those, more than I can speak about here in the presentation. So if you want to have the latest draft of the paper, just drop us a note to receive one. Now, let me just do a personal remark. Of course, also scientists follow kind of religions or feelings or fashions. So at this time, the causality issue is one of the fashions. There have been many fashions I've seen in my academic life in economics. So there was a time where you couldn't run an OLS regression when you have a binary dependent variable. But nowadays, you know that it doesn't matter really whether you run an OLS regression or logit or probit. At least the coefficients are practically the same in most cases. Yes, practically. So sometimes these obsessions are maybe misguided, but that's how it is. Or we have to face that. So this, I personally see the causality discussion as a very important contribution, but it shows us that we have to do a lot to prove and to document that our findings are robust. Yes, that they're not artificially or randomly or whatever through some mistakes produced. That they are holding in a good set of conditions. Now, so what are other findings in this literature? As I said before, there is nothing on internal migration. Not only there's nothing or was nothing for China, but also for all other countries, at least not so far we are aware of. So the articles which are available are those listed here. So far I know, and well, if you look at the original Constant Zimmermann study of 2009, there you find the multidimensional ethnocizer and find out that these effects work positively and no effects on earnings. By the way, very similar than we have it for China later on. Then we have Dridakis for Greece. There he showed that wages are increasing. There's Islamo and Rashki for Canada, and we see effects on unemployment, negative effects, and earnings, no effects. We have Priasha et al. For Australia. There are positive effects on the probability to work and on wages. Carrillo et al. For Italy. There is a positive effect on work. And finally, well, us in this context where we are looking quite consistent with, in general, what has been found. So in a way, we reconfirm what, as a general tendency, found for international migration now for internal migration. Now, what is our contribution? Well, we examine the identity of internal migrants in the largest developing country. We look at multidimensional measurements of labor market outcomes, including working hours, the likelihood of being overworked, hourly wages, and monthly earnings. And we provide causal evidence of how migrants' identity affects labor market outcomes, and highlight the role of local networks on explaining the labor market advantage of assimilated migrants. So it pays to be more closer to the locals. Now, we take advantage of China's great migration. I don't have to show you, demonstrate really to you that this is relevant, but it's much more important than other migration experiences we had in the world in recent times before. And we make use of the dialects in China, which has these advantages for studying. Now, we use data from 2013 from the Dynamic Monitoring Survey of Migrant Population of China. Well, this was conducted by the National Health and Family Planning Commission of China, and includes detailed information on migrants' demographic and social characteristics, employment, income, migration experience, and so on. It was conducted in 8 prefectures, 68 counties, and 844 villages or communities. And well, it surveyed migrants aged 15 to 59 inclusively. Now, we restrict the sample, that will be discussed later, to employees. We had in total 9,790 observations to start with. Now, just to show you the picture where the sample were taken, the experts will immediately see that the pink is provinces and the blue are prefectures. I don't need to go now here in details. Now, the linguistic data, we make use of the Chinese dialect dictionary that identifies 10 dialectal supergroups, 20 dialectal groups, and 105 subgroups. So we can classify each county in China into a dialectal subgroup, and we can measure the distance, the linguistic distance between county pairs. So if you are somewhere, we can show how far you are different when you are in terms of linguistic language, when you are in another host area. So we can pairwise measure the similarity of linguistic characteristics between dialects. Now we are using dialect distance between county pairs to construct the linguistic distance between the residential county and the original province. And this is weighted by population of each county in original province in 2000. Now that's this kind of picture. Let's assume we are in the red point here. And sorry, that is moving away. So we're in this red point here. And the more blue the area is, the far away we are in terms of linguistic differences. That's very intuitive, I think. Now, what is social assimilation, or how do we measure social identity? It's based on a question which is also very present in international surveys, very comparable. Which of the following types of identity do you think you belong to? The answers include local citizen, new local citizen, the citizen of your hometown, and do not know. Well, the number of those, and that was very surprising to me at the beginning, the number of those who cannot decide is surprisingly small, only 3%. So basically this means there are also no interactions. The people either know they are locals or they are not locals, they are from their hometown. Yes, basically it's kind of the linear assimilation type of model I have explained earlier. So it's a special case of what you often found in international migration. I don't think it's specific to to China, that is there's a focus. It's more that there's the different nature of an internal migration from an international migration. Now, what we do is we just throw away the 3% and measure social assimilation by a dummy equal to 1 if the answer is local citizen or new local citizen, and 0 otherwise. So it just means I'm local or I feel local. Yes, that's how we label it in the SQL. Some 45% are of the migrants, we have cohorts which are up to 10 years or so in the new environment. There are some 45% affiliating with the host region. That's interestingly of the same type, same size of, let's say in Germany, migrants are, but migrants are in Germany sometimes for decades, yes, and still are not, yes, associated or another form integrated. So in Germany, 55% in that study were still arguing they are mainly allocated to the host, to the home area. So that's these are very similar numbers, nevertheless, just as a comparison. Now this means we are following this linear picture here, basically. Now, if you look at the raw data, I cannot go into details here. Well, assimilated migrants. So if you look at the two groups, locals and non-locals, so to speak, so those who are feeling local have higher monthly income and hourly wage. They work lower working days, fewer working days and working hours, and they have a lower probability of being overworked. And this is also shown by these pictures. The complete full line is, yes, feeling local, and the dashed line is feeling not local. And you see that the distribution follows what I said before, average hours worked per week. Those who are feeling not local have a somewhat more to the right a curve, and well, in terms of wages, it's the opposite. I mean, it's a little bit below the dashed line. That's the lower curve here. Okay, now the other interesting thing is how is social identity and economic assimilation related. So social and economic assimilation, how this is both related. Now we have calculated the average numbers in the 11. We have 11 cohorts basically. People who just came in 0, and then all the other cohorts are numbered 10. So we have 10 plus 1 is 11. Subgroups. If you look at how they are in terms of the proportion of migrants feeling local, that's the x-axis, and then at the y-axis in panel A, we have the hours worked, and in panel B we have on the y-axis the wages, now average hourly wages. Now you see that below the wages, surprisingly strong converge to the upper dashed line. That is what the natives have in the average in the comparable native sample. And you see that these numbers are clustering not so far away from the local native wages. And then we have the hours worked, and you see that the major change is in the first, from the zero to the next. Then people are working more or less the same amount in the average. So independent of the share of assimilation to the locals. Now, regressions analysis. The key regression is the one you see here, which is why is the output variable either work, whether the person's working or the wages, and then you have factor X, where we have a number of variables included, and then we have the measure of assimilation and the factors for fixed effects for current residual county and the fixed effects for original province and now term. So that's kind of the diff and diff, this kind of standard diff and diff approach, at least in spirit. Now, when we want to instrument, we have to instrument assimilation, and we do this linguistic distance that follows the same scheme. That's kind of the traditional approach. Now, if you look at the OLS results, we see here on top in the upper line all the various variables we are looking at, and we have this crucial variable feel local, like a local member, yes, and then we have the results, and we have lots of controls here included, and to be stable. And you see that what I said that before shows up. Well, if you look at the monthly income, you have a coefficient, but it's not statistically significant. A positive coefficient. Then with the hourly wage, we have something very significant, and that is also true in the other cases when it comes to time, working time, overwork time, where it's all negative and statistically significant. So social assimilation or social identity is correlated with higher hourly wages, with lower working time and less overwork. Then, I have the instrumental regressions we have, and I'll show you in a second, strong first stage, the strong first stage relationship for the experts among you. We have an assimilation, increasing monthly income and hourly wage again. We have that assimilation significantly decreases the work time and the probability of being overworked. So that's the same result. So that is as a tendency stable, and it's also robust if you control for individual language skills, dialect issues in panel B here. So the upper panel A part shows in the first line again the same story again. Coefficients are a little bit different, smaller, not all is exactly the same of significance, but the general tendency is robust. And here is the instrumenting regression with a high F statistic, so comparatively at least. So now if we would include, or we have included in all these regressions, well, can you speak the dialect? Can you understand the dialect? So, well, yes, it affects the feel local. That's what we think is right, but linguistic distance still plays a role. But when we include these two variables also in the other regressions, you see it's nowhere significant. This is not a statistical proof that the exclusion restriction is valid. There could be other reasons why it is not the case, but at least it let us feel that we are in a good shape. So now, then we had a number of large number of robustness checks, and this here is an overview of it. Before I quickly go in some of the details. So I understand that I still have about 12 minutes before my talk ends, and so I will first go through this slide and a few more to show you the details. Now, the effect of language, as we have just seen, on migrants' labor market outcomes is economically and statistically insignificant. So that's one check already. Now, also migration sorting mainly exists across original province and or across county of destination. Whereas the amount of sorting within origin destination pair is actually small. That is good for us. Then sorting on observables is not significantly correlated with the instrumental variable or the labor market outcomes, suggesting that sortings on unobservables is unlikely to be a serious threat to identification. That's in the spirit of a paper by Tonji et al., which we are using as a test. And results remain robust even after controlling for a number of variables step by step for original region by destination county fixed effects and other interconnected factors such as transportation distance, log off the number of migrants from the same province, wage gap between the place of origin and the destination. Further, our estimates pass what is called the plausibly exogenous test developed by Conley et al. Well, this basically says, well, it might be not perfect, but is it really relevant, so to speak, in a loose sense, in a statistical way, without going into the details of this test here? Then, well, if you have this, you have a result, you want not only that it works, but you want to know how and why, and is this helping to make us confident that this is the right way of the channel we have identified. So the adaptation to local identity significantly raises migrants' probability of interacting with local residents, having local neighbors, finding jobs through the networks, and so on. It pays to be local because you can interact with your local people. Now, these are lots of numbers and we cannot go through them. It's just, I'm telling you again what the key items are. We have looked at, we controlled for original region and destination counties, fixed effects, not much difference. Control for log transportation distance, not much difference. Control for log migrants of the same province. Control for wage gap, also that does not change the basic pattern. Now, that thing, correcting for sample selection bias, well, you may recall, maybe you have overheard it, that we focus the sample on those employed, so self-employed, and employers have been taken out. This could cause potential bias. Now, we have modeled the sample selection process, and we show here in that table that the estimates are practically the same. So that is again an indicator of stability. Yeah, finally, the final part is on the mechanisms. We have here 3 parts we are interested in: social interaction, neighborhood choice, and networks in job searching. Now, that is the mechanism: network and neighborhood choice. When you look at the upper part here, you see what we are looking at. How do migrants interact with ethnic people? Well, feel local means less. The more you feel local, you interact less with ethnic people. Well, if you feel local, what happens here? Positively, you interact with local people. If you feel local, you interact also with local people. Might be obvious, but it's good to see it so strong and significant. Then, well, are you a member of ethnic organization? That was another variable available to sample. No, no effect. So if you feel local, you are not more likely to be a member of an ethnic organization. So you might be in there, but maybe not. That's not relevant for you anymore, perhaps. Yes, at least not in terms of what we are aiming at, finding a job and being successful in the labor market. Well, then neighborhood, where are you? And neighbors are mostly local citizens. Yeah, if you feel local, it's more likely that you say, yes, I'm living mostly with local citizens. So you live with locals, and well, neighbors are mostly non-local citizens. The likelihood of this is negative if you feel local. So you know, not okay. This is the. It's a different question. It still comes out even more significant than in the other case, because there are also mixed areas. That's the last one where there is no effect on this. So basically, the story is that social identity significantly reduces the probability of interacting with people from the same original place, and significantly increases the probability of interacting with local people. And with network, it's the same. With neighborhood, it's the same. Okay, now the next thing is job search. How to find a job? Of course, there are many studies, at least I know, I've seen or heard about many of those studies also for China, that job searching is an issue of having contacts, having people. That's true in many countries, by the way, not only in China, but also in Germany. It's not necessarily the government institutions who want and should help to find jobs. It's often that we find job seekers find their jobs through their network. So the networks are important. Another question is, how much is it important to be involved with family, relatives, which is a general result. But in this context, that's the first column. If you feel local, then the likelihood to find the jobs through family, relatives, or friends, classmates is lower. Yes, it's strongly lower. You don't rely on the traditional mechanism, which you may have on top also. Yes, I mean, it's also maybe if you have many family moving with you and they're around and they can also help, but that's not here in this concrete result. And to the opposite, find the jobs through themselves or start a business on their own. Well, that's now positive and slightly significant. Find the jobs through local people is, however, significant on a higher level. And as I said before, find the jobs through government, social agencies, internet, job fairs, and others like that. That's not really affected by feeling local. It's not that you cannot find a job through this mechanism. It's just that feeling local plays no role for this. So social identity significantly increases the probability of finding jobs through local people and on their own, and reduces the probability of finding jobs through relatives, friends, or classmates. That's the kind of story we have here. Okay, now there was the argument, well, we did tons of things, yes. Well, there might be many other characteristics available in the data which may affect or influence our findings. Now we are controlling this exercise here for job characteristics. So this is basically here shown at the end of the regressive here in the table, occupation, industry, unit type. We included all the information we have in terms of dummies, and we find that job characteristics can have partially labor market impacts, but the estimations we have are not basically different. So for the feel local variable, so that is another robustness test. So, and finally, I think we have subjective attitudes and perceptions. What is that helping? So now, to what extent is feeling local is so to speak influencing the willingness to be neighbors of local citizens? That is higher, yes, and the willingness to be friends of local citizens is not significant. The willingness to be involved in community units and become a member of them, also not significant. So it's a general tendency only to as a willingness to be neighbors of local citizens. If you feel local, but you feel that what is your feelings that you themselves belong to the city currently lived on? That must be it's strongly positive. The willingness for themselves or their relatives to marry local citizens, or what is your willingness to marry local? Yeah, that is positive and significant, and the feeling that local citizens are willing to accept themselves to be one of them is also positive. However, feelings that local citizens willing to be neighbors of themselves is not significant. And the same is for feelings that local citizens like and respect non-local citizens. So this all provides a consistent general picture. Not everything is 100% in line, but we should not expect that. Socially assimilated migrants, so people with a high local identity, are significantly more willing to be neighbors of local citizens, feel they belong to the host place, or willing to marry locals and feel that they are accepted by a local citizen. That is the story which confirms the channel through which we go through. Now, the last point often asked during presentations, what is about the heterogeneity of these effects? How heterogeneous is all this? We look first at gender, second at young against old age, and then at high educated versus the rest. Does this affect the feelings affect differently? And well, since the numbers cannot be read so easily, I just go to this presentation, to this slide. By gender, well, for female migrants, assimilation mainly reduce their work time. They have lower work time. Socially assimilated male migrants tend to have jobs with higher hourly wage and less work time. By age, there is no notable difference. And by education level, we find that assimilation significantly raises monthly earnings and hourly wage, and reduces work time of the less educated migrants. For the high educated migrants, social assimilation has no impact on work time, whereas hourly wage and monthly earnings reduce significantly. Okay, that's a lot of results, but the core finding is very clear and simple. But using linguistic distance as the instrument to which hopefully satisfies the exclusion restriction in your opinion also, not only in ours. This study finds that social identity increases migrants' hourly wages, reduces the average working hours, and the likelihood of being overworked. And the main mechanism is that social identity significantly increases the propensity of interacting with local citizens and living in local neighborhood, and significantly increases the likelihood of finding jobs with help from the locals. Okay, so that is the basic finding. I keep that here and I stop sharing. So the core message is it pays to assimilate, to be like the locals. That's not an easy expected result, because in other studies in international migration, you often find that keeping both identities play a good role, but in that other context, the identity to the origin may have values, economic values, which are more easily be explained than in the case of internal migration. So basically, that's what we find, and I hope you find that work of interest, and we are looking forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Klaus. Yeah, that's wonderful talk and very clear, and you also introduced the general literature, and we have a number of questions coming in. So I would like to raise those questions from the general points and more specific details. And we are very happy to be joined by Dr. Cai Shu from Jinan University, and it's so great to have both of you being here. So the first question is, social identity changes quickly for families with different generations. How do you see the future trend of labor market in China?
Sorry, I have to unmute me. Well, the question is social identity changing?
Yeah, changing,
I mean,
across generations.
Across generations. You mean that the younger generation is different than the older generation?
Yeah.
But here, the identity is, yeah, that's certainly true. The identities are changing in that sense. But as long as the respective groups, people are of similar types, the question remains. Yes. So if I move today to another province, or in 10 years or 20 years to another province, or if I'm somebody different, a younger generation, yes, that will then very likely meet other people with the same kind of general spirit. If it's not a local spirit, if it's a generational spirit, then it would be a spirit across the country. There would be not so much, I think, of a basic issue. So it would be perhaps, let's say, if it might be easier to adjust if the general spirit or the general identity driving factors are the same across the country. Yes, then it will become more closer. Then the differences are no longer larger, and then the effects might be even weaker. It will not pay so much. That would be my immediate response. Maybe Kai, you have another. Sure, you have another idea for this question.
Yes, I agree with you that if we consider the generations, identity may be shaped within the family by their parents, and they are more likely associated with the destination places than their peers. Then, according to the finding we have, they will be more likely to be successful in the sense of working less and on higher wages than their peers.
Yes, thank you.
Often it's only the second generation which is really adjusting according to preference. We know this from other variables, yes, in other countries, that yes. In the first generation, the adaptation to identities and preferences is weak, not perfect, but in the second generation, it takes place, but also in some cases, not necessarily completely. Yes, I mean that's the other issue, at least from international experiences.
Yeah, indeed. The next question is also a general question, and they ask: the Chinese migrant workers constitute a large part of the citizens. How could the new generation of the Chinese migrant workers find their own social identity and get more assimilated into the society? I guess your findings speak directly to this question, right?
Sure, do you see that?
Yes. Yes. Our research actually reflects to some extent about the potential influential factors on social identity of the migrants, which are highlighted by our research is the dialect distance or cultural similarity between the home and the host regions. Apart from that, we think some other issues may also be important, which is not so highlighted in our research. For example, the hukou system, and I think that's important. If the as also have been done already by current local governments, generally relaxing the hukou restriction, and that will be certainly and equalizing access to public service for the migrants. That will certainly help them to assimilate it in destination counties, destination places as well.
Yeah, that's more a policy, an important policy conclusion. Hukou is bringing a burden to migrants. Yes, and the advantage to integrate, assimilate is lower. Yes, it would be a strong. There's a disadvantage. Yes, I mean maybe an incentive to maybe move home again or whatever, or move on where you can get hukou. But I know that's difficult to. I'm not an expert on hukou, but it's abolishing hukou would mean that migrants have on the condition maybe of integration, yes, or assimilation, yes, that would let's say in the German context we're discussing giving earlier citizenships to people who are longer in the country as soon as they have acquired the language, for instance, or have good work or education experiences. And that is kind of, I mean, if you translate it to the Chinese context, which is of course not comparable, but then it would mean that the incentive would be stronger for migrants to settle down and have family and integrate.
Yes, thank you so much. That's wonderful answer. So there are some also detailed technical question or the interest about the data. A few of the audiences ask about data. So can you present a little more about the survey data you have used for this study?
Okay, well, yeah. Shu, you want to say more about this? I mean,
yes. This data is conducted by the government. Actually, it's a repeated cross-section data starting from 2009 and 2018. It's repeated cross-section. We use the data in 2013 mainly because in 2013 this survey included a special measure focusing on social assimilation. It contains the key question, which is important for us, is asking about the social identity of the migrants, which I've already shown by Professor Zimmermann in the lecture. And in addition, it also includes more detailed information about how the migrants assimilated in the destination area in this particular year. So that's why we choose this 2013. Yes.
Oh, thank you. The next also detailed question is about the assimilation results for females. The audience asked, it is very interesting that you mentioned more assimilation for the females will reduce the work time. May I ask or know more about this finding?
Well, let me just see if we can find the
for females assimilation for
females again. Yes. So yeah. It's
there might be some gender difference, right? In that
there were some gender differences. Yes. So we had I mean, I can show the table again, but basically what we had is we had a male in addition to the local dummy, we had an interaction variable included, male times that variable, and it shows that that in particular the differences between the monthly income and hourly wage. Yes, that's basically what we find, well, when we translate this to words, so to speak, for female migrants, assimilation mainly reduces working time. Yes, and while socially assimilated male migrants tend to have jobs with higher hourly wage and less work time. So that's the findings we have so far. I can see. Shu, can you add something here, or is this all what we know?
Yes, that's what we find.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't think we have studied this more, but it's of course an important issue. We have to investigate further.
Right. So let me take advantage of my role as the chair to ask a more technical question. So I'm interested in the IV you are constructing. So I remember you were like take the dialect distance between the destination county and the weighted dialect of the province of origin. So why did you choose to take the weighted average instead of like just use county pairs?
We only have information of the home province in the data set.
I see. I see. Yeah. That's it.
Okay, that's the argument for it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
By the way, we're using population rate of earlier year.
Okay, that's great. We have one more question about the question asked about the identity economy characteristics. What makes me feel confusing is the differences or the relations between identity economy and social capital. Thus, this study could give me something about this question. So I don't know what the question is here, but it's like a comments. It's about like the relationship between identity, economy, and the social capital. Could you say something about that?
Yeah, social identity and social capital. Yeah, the question is, what is there really something? I mean, of course, we're talking about a form of social identity, namely local identity. Yeah, that's only about, this is one part of a complex a set of indicators measuring social capital in general. So it's part of social capital. In principle, that's what I always saw, is that when we measure, let's say, ethnicity, yes, how ethnic are you, in what way, in unified or multidimensional, this comes with a set of knowledge, cultures, traditions, informations, which is of value for economically and for society in general. And so what we learn from here, then in this particular result, from this particular result, I think that taking up the local culture of the receiving area in China of a migrant who wants to work will make the person faster able to reap the advantages in the labor market. Yes, so that is, in this sense, to giving up home capital, social capital, to take over a host area capital is, so to speak, it makes use of local social capital. So in this context, I would argue, is our study part of the general discussion about social capital, or more specific, ethnic capital? Normally, you talk about how, let's say, within a country, if traditions are transformed or given further to next generations, then this is about building up or preserving social capital. Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. The other questions also good.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Such great and so important topic. but I just realized we are quickly running out of time. But I believe the audiences can ask questions while emailing both of you or either of you for the questions. And I think today we will conclude the first lecture of this series of lectures. And please welcome to join us in the future ones. I believe the next one will be in 10 days on June the 30th. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And yeah, have a good evening, good afternoon, or good morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your interest.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.